All right. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for agreeing to chat with us today. And I'm really excited to jump into the topic. Just thinking about change management and adoption and some of the projects you've been involved that I've heard you speak on. Would love to pick your brain and just have a conversation about some of those themes. But before we do that, if you could, can you just introduce yourself and your role and maybe a little bit about, how you're coming at this topic?
Absolutely. So my name's Steffaney Zohrabyan. It's a bit of a complicated last name and a complicated first name, but most people get it on the second or third try.
Nice.
But I live in gorgeous Lehi, Utah, and I work from home remotely for Cisco, which is a work from anywhere company. And I sit within their global sales enablement team on an insights and innovation team. So I have lots of data people on my team. I have individuals who are looking at sales performance, behaviors that go into sales, and then I come in and try and put all of our enablement content, probably not all of it, but I try and whittle it down and get the most important messages, executive comms and things like that in the flow of work for sellers. So as they go about their day, as they're performing their tasks, really understanding their behaviors and getting them to engage with certain behaviors and upskill as they're doing their thing as sellers.
No, that's great. And yeah, so let's dive into that. I've heard you speak about the 70-20-10 enablement model and how important that is to the work you're doing. Can you talk about what this means to you and this approach and how is that effective in your mind in creating, longer term behavior change?
Absolutely. So it's really just kind of flipping a traditional enablement and learning model on its head, where traditionally everything is very focused on traditional training, web-based training, in-person training. I know that I work for companies who have trainers go all over the world and run so many different types of workshops for days and weeks at a time. And that really, in the 70-20-10 model, we realized that it can be very effective to just stick with that being 10% of the type of enablement that you provide to people. So traditional training, in-person training, and all those fall within that 10%. Then the 20% is more of this like knowledge sharing and how we can get our sellers to teach each other and looking at mentorship and coaching programs. And then the 70% is actually helping them upskill within the flow of work and what that looks like. So it's a Gartner, I want to make sure credit is given where credit is
Absolutely.
due. This is a Gartner concept. So
Yep.
I don't know, Accenture guy, I'm sorry. But yeah, this is a Gartner principle. This was brought in by our former VP of Sales Enablement. And it's really just made us think about things differently. It's really just made us think, okay, this is the status quo. We've done 3-week boot camps in person. I think Cisco used to do like 3-month boot camps in person. And I'm like, don't these people have families? Like you come back
Right.
after 3 months, your kid's a whole new person.
Yeah.
So I'm just really of the opinion that with the 70-20-10 model, it's just really thinking about your enablement programs differently. If somebody asks for a training on a specific topic, ask, could we do anything else? Like, what are other talent development venues and what are different talent development avenues we can take to really drive this behavior and help it stick with sellers besides making them sit camera off in a webinar for 2 hours?
No, and it's fascinating to really cause you to rethink the way that that's being delivered. And I would assume also really think about the outcome, right? Because then it forces you to think, well, no, why do you want training? And it's a question we ask all the time. It's like, okay, great, you want sales training. Why and what are you trying to accomplish and what needs to be different? Now, maybe let's rethink how that's going to happen, right? And so I love that in terms of maybe there needs to be some delivery, but in the flow of work is happening anyway. It just may not be conscious or kind of as thoughtful as if we lay it out that way, right? So they're going to struggle through, they're going to try the concepts, and maybe they get it or don't, right? But flipping that around and saying, well, what can we do to really encourage that? And maybe you could talk more about that specifically, related to change management when you're looking at digital adoption and onboarding, upscaling type initiatives. What does that 70% end up looking like?
In terms of change management, one thing I've seen is the necessity of something. So I see a lot, especially with executive communications and with new new marketing campaigns and just new ways of selling, it's really presented to sellers almost like a commercial. Like, here's why you should sell this. And it's sent in an email. It's within the different sales hubs or the content management systems. But there's just not as many call to actions. It's like, okay, now go sell it. But the power of inflow enablement is that you're actually within a seller's workflow telling them, okay, here's how you're going to do this. Here's the ICP for this. Here's where you look on LinkedIn to find this perfect person to maybe invite to your next call. Here's where you're looking in Salesforce. And here's the point right now. Here's a little trigger that says now is the time to bring in a specialist to meet with your person and to meet with your customer. So I think that there's so many different ways of presenting enablement content, but I get a little frustrated when it just looks like a commercial. I'm like, okay, like, but now what do I do? Even like commercials, if you look at like the ShamWow guy, he's like, call now, or he even gives a call to action, but I feel like it's just like, that was good to know. I did my training for the month. Now it's time for me to, I don't know, go check my funnel. I just want to make sure that with any type of enablement content, it's just very specific. They know it's for them, and it becomes this trusted source of value that they know if I look at this little message on the screen, or if I look at this little pop-up that's come in front of me, I know that if I click next, then I'm going to know exactly what I need to do and can potentially get closer to closing a deal.
It's so important. And I think at the closure of any training, I mean, we are still going to do traditional training, I'm sure, right? And so that may be in person or virtual, but at the end of that, there needs to be that CTA, right? That call to action to say, okay, now go do this. And I love, and in our programs where, we have a 30, 60, 90-day checkpoint to say, here's your homework and go apply it in real life. And then we're going to come back and collaborate and talk with your peers, right, about what's working and what challenges and how that comes into play. But I think you're right. It can't just be an email or that sponsor video that goes out. We really need to get them engaged. And let me talk more about that specifically related to the frontline managers. I mean, that's an area that we spend a lot of our time in. And, specifically, I think their role is so important in that change management and the adoption to say, are they using it? And the training team is never going to be in enough places at once, or never going to be able to be out there coaching. So the managers need to be the one to pull it through. How does that come into play in your experience, with this kind of 70-20-10 model?
I have an incredible director. His name's Cameron Tanner, if he's listening. Hi, Cameron.
Great.
But he actually brought me into Cisco, and he's someone who firmly believes that the first line managers are the ones who need to be we need to be putting as much support as possible towards them. So when I think about how to support these first line managers, they really have such a hard job. I mean, all of sales is hard, let's be honest. But when I look at these managers who have to, make sure that their teams are creating quota, I think that really comes down to the 20%. What type of coaching model does the company have? I worked at companies where, like, do we have coaching? I've heard we have coaching. I can't, where do they sit? And it turns out there is no coaching program.
Right.
There's no formal coaching program. But if you're going to invest in your first line managers to do anything, it's really coaching for performance. One thing that's really impressed me over the past 1 or 2 years is the Gallup Strengths Finder assessment. And I don't think that enough sales teams really lean into this, but it gives you it's a little test you take. It gives you these top 5 strengths. And I always wanted to be like, the influencer, the powerhouse. And I'm always somebody that's just like I'm a knowledge expert. I'm so-and-so, but it gives you these really great things to say, like, these are your strengths. And the goal of the Strengths Finder assessment is to say, if you coach to your strengths, you'll get so much farther, so much faster than if you were coaching to poor behavior. So when I think about these first line managers, if I were going to set up a coaching program, I would set something up around strengths and say, we've got a bunch of people who are so great at, we have this older group of sellers at Cisco, for example, who have such an incredible knowledge of networking switches and all this hardware that Cisco used to sell. And then we have this younger generation that is so good at social selling, is so good at using their tech stack, and is so good at finding the right answers in the right places. Could these first line managers set up some sort of informal or formal mentorship program where you're almost doing bilateral mentorship, where you have these experienced sellers teaching these younger sellers these soft skills, working with accounts, managing accounts and relationships, and understanding the full breadth of solutions that we offer at Cisco. And can you have these younger sellers come in and maybe teach these older sellers how to, manage a tech stack with 25 plus applications? I think that that's a really great way to kind of alleviate a lot of the stress of these first line managers, but also working to the strengths of the individuals in their team and making sure that there's that tribal knowledge and that I guess it's tribal. I'm trying to the tacit knowledge, not so much explicit knowledge that's kept in a sales hub or a content management system, but something that's really shared among the team.
Well, and that touches on the whole collaborative learning, which is something we've seen evolve. And I think more effectively even during COVID, right? That since we've been virtual, we've have to think creatively about how do we get people together, how do they share, and anytime we can do that and talk about real life examples, I think it makes it so much more valuable. So whether that's a voice of the seller video or bringing the manager into a discussion and having them help to facilitate and moderate, hey, how's this working and what's good or what's being successful. I think that's super critical. And yeah, investing in the managers, I love to hear that because I think it does start with the managers. They need to have the skills. I'm just going to mention, when you talk about coaching, we find a lot of clients, and if you ask frontline managers, hey, are you coaching your team? They'll say, well, of course, I'm a great coach. And really what they're doing is telling or directing, do it this way, or they're coaching deals, which is great, needs to happen, but that's a different type of coaching. And so when you're talking coaching for skills and performance, I think we need a little bit more practical and systematic approach to say, well, where are those gaps and where are the strengths, to your point? Let's highlight what's working and reinforce and share that with the team. And then let's lean in on those gaps, right? And see what we can do to address them. So no, really, really great theme there. I've also heard you talk about executive sponsorship. And, it's one of those critical components that we think about for a successful initiative. And can you talk about what that means to you and how you've helped pull through and get, good executive sponsorship, not just in the kickoff video, right, or kickoff meeting, but throughout the project?
I think that's probably one of the hardest things, but that's the most important part of change management. To say you're a sponsor, and whether you're launching a new sales enablement technology or you're, there's a new campaign that needs to go out. We're trying to sell these types of solutions. We're trying to bundle these offerings. Having that, just the face of somebody there is so important. I really noticed this when we were going through like the rest of world supply chain issues. And we really wanted to let the sellers know, like, our executive, he knows your struggles, he knows your pains. And of course, emails were going out, executive comms were going out, but we thought, could we reach them in the flow of work with the face of the executive and say, you know what, here's some updates. We know things are hard. I want your feedback, and give a little poll about, do you feel comfortable reaching out to your customers with these updated lead times, these lag times? But having the face of that individual within that little pop-up message, I felt like was so valuable, even more than having a name and an email go out. So even just having that visual of saying, like, this leader wants to know your feedback right now, and then having that closed feedback loop with the individuals, and then improving things quarter by quarter. I'm somebody who, I'm not great at baselining. I'm not great at gathering data. I feel like I'm data dyslexic, but my leader really wants me to keep getting better. So I've been trying really hard. But one thing that we did is we really measured that feedback. So, one quarter we said, give us your feedback, tell us how it's going. The next quarter, and they were ruthless. They did not hold back. We had a free-form text field. They shared exactly how they felt. I was surprised they were that honest. And it wasn't anonymous. We let them know that we were going to be capturing their name, getting back to them.
They'll tell you.
They did not. Yeah, they did not hold back. And so we improved the messaging. We, circumstances didn't exactly change during that time. We still had tough lead times. We still had to prepare these sellers for these tough conversations with customers. But we noticed that by closing this feedback loop and providing them with more templates in different languages, easier access to what they needed and more frequent updates, we saw that their rating that they gave us from like an angry face to a happy face actually improved quite a bit. So it improved. I think it was at a 2.9. And again, nothing got better except for the fact that we were giving them the resources they asked for. And we improved it to a 3.5 the next quarter. And we actually had more people providing feedback. And it just became this great thing where now we're having these conversations with the sellers. There's so many of them. At Cisco, we've got like 17,000 sellers, got 100,000 partners. It's just so big that I couldn't go to everybody and ask. But by having a tool that allows you to pull people at that pain point and at that point where they would have the best response for you based on their initial feedback, that's where I think the real power came in terms of helping them along this painful journey of getting the supplies that they needed for their customers.
Wow. Well, yeah, and I love the real-time feedback, right? Because you learn so much, and even from the verbatims or the anecdotal feedback tells you a lot about, oh, well, these are some suggestions. And yeah, I always tell we learn so much just from asking our clients what they think and how they would respond. So I want to be sensitive to our time, but I'll kind of wrap up on this question. So having implemented and in the process, I guess, as well with different initiatives, but can you just share, any challenges or anything that the listeners should know about the 70-20 model, the 70-20-10 model, and what should they keep in mind if they're kind of headed down this path?
I think the hardest thing is actually knowing seller workflows. So at Cisco, we have these top performing sellers who have the biggest accounts, and it's mainly because they have these big accounts, and that's what gets them into Club Cisco every year. But the ones who actually have this strong performance right out of the gate, that's what you want to capture. So those underdogs who have had the greatest improvement, really looking at what they're doing during their day-to-day. We have an incredible member of our team. I think he was at Walmart before. His name's Doug, and he hones in on the seller behavior. And he doesn't just talk to these top selling reps who have amazing accounts and who just, lucked out there. He's talking to individuals who are just doing a great job and who are standing out in the ways that they're navigating their tech stack and really using things to their advantage. So I think really looking at those individuals as well, looking at improvers, those who have maybe they did get a big account, but it's because they started at a place that was really tough and they really climbed a mountain. So really understanding that performance and those workflows is really key to being able to put those sales enablement items within the flow of work and really architecting an environment where sellers can access things quickly and can upskill quickly before a call with a client or before hopping into a discovery call.
Wow, no, I hadn't heard that before, but I think it's so important to think about kind of the whole implementation versus, this fallacy of a top performer analysis. And the truth is the top performers, one, probably don't know what they do that makes them that successful. And also it's really hard to, emulate the top 1%. So, the best athletes are just gifted and do some things unconsciously, but we can't model the whole sales organization on that 1%. You can model at, the top tier and say, all right, well, what are they doing? Or as you said, the improvers, what have they done to get better? How do we put that into the flow of work? So yeah, that's really interesting. Well, I'll wrap up. Anything else you'd like to add or share, just on this whole topic or, lessons you've learned along the way?
I think when I think about change management and really supporting, sellers through changes, the ADKAR model is great. The awareness, the desire, the knowledge, skills, and reinforcement. But ProSci will never let me do this, and I may get a cease and desist. But I want to add another R to the end of that to be the reward. Of course, sellers get paid. They're not sellers for free, but I think in addition to that reinforcement, if you can highlight these top sellers and within the flow of work, say, hey, Johnny, was the best performer from last quarter. Here's Johnny's playbook, or even just putting people's name in lights for their peers to see or for their leaders to see. That type of acknowledgement, I think, can really catapult any change management process. So I would highly recommend that. You're not listening. You don't know who I am, but I would really recommend ADKAR R.
I love that. Yeah, and it is so important because one, we want to celebrate the successes and we want to capture those things that are working instead of we're often pointing out the things that are broken. But yeah, let's reward that, and I'm good with that. Let's put the R on the end and make it part of reinforcement and what happens afterwards. That's a great call. So, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and pleasure to chat with you.